Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
All right, back to Casey as we're again live from the Miami Book Fair, broadcasting at my website, totalture.net/Total Education Network, and live on Blog Talk Radio. And we're looking at specifically enough tomorrow, broadcasting live with Life Improvement Radio, who started this process in 2011. Casey, I'm just on a roll. That's perfect the way you're doing the curtain call. They can go and say that they're rolling. They're the big stars today. And I can't check the text messages today because of how we've dealt with some of the issues, but we've gone through and we're really rolling good. Who's next?
Okay, next we have Mirta Ojito, author of Hunting Season. And
Hi, Mirta. Hi, Mirta. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Fantastic, and I'm sure you're enjoying the Miami Book Fair as well. It's just such a tremendous fair, isn't it?
It is absolutely tremendous, and the weather is incredible. It's 81 degrees.
Oh, you can't do that to me. I woke up at 30 degrees in Pittsburgh.
That's why I'm doing it to you.
I'm like, oh, come on now. I wake up this morning and said, oh, my toe. I have this I had this injury, that a broken toe, lacerated toe. Finally got my boot off. Pain wasn't feeling bad. Cold weather comes, guess what? I'm dealing with pain. So, but you got to live on, and especially as our last guest talks about living on. But Mirta, can you tell us a little bit about your background for our audience that is not familiar with your work, and then we'll get right into your book.
Yeah, absolutely. How far back do you want to go? I was born in Cuba, in Havana, Cuba. I came from Cuba to the U.S. aboard a boat named Mañana in 1980 in the Mariel boat list. I wrote about that in a book that was released 2005, 10 years ago this year, as a matter of fact, called Finding Mañana, a memoir of a Cuban exodus. I came to Miami, and I have lived on and off in Miami since then for 35 years, with the exception of very, very important years, both personally and in my career in New York. I worked for the Miami Herald, and later I worked for the New York Times, where I covered, among other things, immigration. And then I taught journalism at Columbia University, and now I'm back in Miami, but working in television. So it's been a varied career, but always in journalism, and Hunting Season is my second book.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that, but you have so much of other interesting things to add to this. So what do you do in television now, Mirta?
I work for NBC Universal, and I'm the director of standards here for Spanish language in Telemundo.
Really? Oh my! Oh, so that's interesting. The background of experience in journalism, and then you were talking about immigration and all. I mean, I could just imagine the conversations we could have about a variety of topics. But I definitely want you to give you some platform for your book. But I want to go to other stuff because, yeah.
Yeah, immigration is sort of what I've done for a long time. I did it here in Miami. Of course, when you work for the Miami Herald, you can't escape it. I don't think there is an actual immigration beat in Miami. I just think everybody covers immigration. Then I did cover it formally in the New York Times a few years while I was there. And then in my work, certainly my two books deal with immigration. And it's just something that I'm very interested in and passionate about.
Oh, I mean, and just the conversations that are happening, and then we'll get definitely into the book, the conversations that are happening on both sides of the aisle with this election, and especially even with what we're talking about with Syria, and oh my gosh, it's just like, I'm sure it's amazing that this topic's coming up so much, bad or good, in so many ways.
I think it's one of the most important topics of this century. I sort of already felt that in the last 2 decades of the 20th century, but certainly this century, immigration, it's a huge global issue that we ought to be paying attention to rather than sort of yelling at each other across the aisle, because it is fundamentally changing the world as we know it.
It's fundamentally changing it, and we have to understand this, and I think that what I know as an educator is that my kids are going to have to understand that when they're competing for colleges and universities, and it's a global thing now, we are dealing with globally people wanting to work in the United States, wanting to go to college in the United States, and we're just becoming this large melting pot. And we have to understand that it's not just all about the United States, Mirta, and that's the point that sometimes people miss. We can't go back history 30 years. We have to think about today.
No, totally. I mean, all you have to do is look at the front page. I teach as well. I teach a journalism class at the University of Miami as an adjunct, and I constantly challenge my students to find a day in the newspaper where there is not one story about immigration, no matter what part of the world, whether it's in the United States or Syrians moving across Europe or everybody else moving across Europe. I mean, movement it's really older than the word. It was the first thing we did. We moved, and therefore we became humans, actually.
Yeah, so let's get into the book for sure. And I think that the thing that talking about murder, but on another side of the page where immigrants murdered, and the process of what happens on this, and the discussion of immigration is big in your book, isn't it?
Yes, because my book is about an undocumented immigrant from Ecuador who was murdered in a town on Long Island called Patchogue. And he was murdered by a group of teenagers. They were at that time 17, I believe one was 16, 18, who basically this was their weekly entertainment. Once they were arrested, one of them told the police, I didn't do it that much, maybe once or twice a week. And what they did was they went out hunting for beaners, as in black beans, or as in beans, that's what they called them. And they were looking for immigrants that they perceived all to be Mexicans and undocumented or illegal, as they said. In fact, most of the immigrants in that part of Long Island were from Ecuador. And in fact, they were not only from Ecuador, but from a very little town, from the same town. So there was an enclave of immigrants from Gualaceo, which is a beautiful, tiny town near Cuenca in Ecuador. And this immigrant was one of the few, or perhaps the only one that at least we know of, who fought back instead of taking the harassment and the blows from these young people. There were 7 of them.
Right.
Fought back with his belt, and they got him killed. They stabbed him, and they killed him. He was 37 years old.
Oh. And what happens with undocumented immigrants in a lot of ways that things can be covered up when you are not, that they don't know you're in that country and stuff like that? What type of discrimination they deal with, and also investigation for the murder?
Well, the investigation happened right away because the young people were caught right away. Somebody called 911 when they saw him bleeding, and he died 37 minutes later in the hospital. And the young men were caught, and they were tried. A couple of them, one of them actually was sentenced to 25 years, the one who actually stabbed him. And the others ended up with lower sentences. But what happens is it's very sad. It's many places. And what's really incredible in this particular case is that this town is only 63 miles away. And also that this is a town of immigrants. There were Italians, and there were Germans, and there were Irish, just like the history of the United States. So all those levels of context were there, and yet this happened. But I decided to write the book on this particular case because I thought, the age of the young people was something that it was unbelievable to me that people this young could harbor so much hatred. And also because Long Island had been, it was sort of ground zero for immigration. At that point, this was 2008, there was a lot of hate language directed towards immigrants from elected officials, frankly. And I think that seeped down to the community in ways that ended up being very damaging for everyone. And in the case of Mr. Lucero, fatal.
Yeah. And what year did I think I missed the year this took place?
2008. This happened November 8, 2008.
And it's just really perfect timing for your book to come out, especially with some of the rhetoric. And it's very, Mirta, I'm more to the right, but yet what I'm hearing, the rhetoric from the right, it just makes me very sad to hear this. Because the fact of the matter is we are all human beings, and we have to be treated with respect and dignity. And what we're hearing sometimes from different politicians and people about immigration is very saddening in so many ways, because The same thing happened to my ancestors when they came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that struck me about this book. You know, I'm the mother of 3 boys. They're now almost 21, 15, and 12. So they were younger when I began working on the book. In 2010 is when I began working on it. But, you know, if you're doing things right, you have dinner with your kids and you have conversations around the table. And presumably you try to use those moments, they're very brief moments, briefer every year. You try to use those moments to impart some values and to talk to them and to listen to them. And what struck me here was the importance of words. As a reporter, as a writer, I've always understood that, but it became crystal clear to me during the reporting of this book that took about 3 years that words matter, that what we say around the table, that what we say to our kids, that what elected officials say, people listen, and particularly kids listen, and it changes. It has the potential for changing a community. I was surprised when so many of these kids said, my God, so much of this was already going on at the high school. And I interviewed several people at the high school and around the kids and parents, and everybody professed, the parents, the adults, they didn't know what's going on. No one knew what's going on. And yet these kids all went to the same high school. And the immigrant kids who were going to the high schools were talking about receiving the same kind of treatment, not the beatings, but the verbal harassment from the other kids. So that bullying had been going on for a long time. And apparently no one has stopped it, which is very, very dangerous.
It's terrible. It's terrible when schools and administrations do not stop bullying in schools, regardless of what reasoning it is. It's the most horrible, affecting thing. Getting beaten up by a bully is not as worse as the words. The beat up can heal at time, and it's not something that rings in your ears every day when people keep telling you you're dumb, you're stupid, you don't belong in this country. All these different things that occur, and yet we don't do anything about it. And our words and how hateful they can be on either side in different things when people don't have differing beliefs. We're missing it more, Mirta, than any time in our history. And that's my concern. And when I talked about, saying I'm coming from the right in a lot of these situations, and politically, it's more about social issues than anything else. The things about these other topics, I am so fed up with it, I won't even speak about it. I won't even say anything. I'm just disappointed as a journalist for that.
I also think that the schools that do pay attention to that sort of thing are too narrow-minded in the sense that they keep the focus in the school. As long as the kids are behaving in school, then they don't really think about what's happening after 3 o'clock when that bell rings. Yeah. And some of these kids, that wasn't the case, actually. They had issues in school already. I mean, lots of suspensions and lots of issues. But maybe there wasn't anything that they thought it was incredibly horrible to kick him out of a school. He was there, but since as they left school were quite different, as it was revealed during their confession, they all confessed to the crime and during the trial, ultimately. It was just really horrifying to hear these things from, the killer himself was an athlete with, everyone thought, a bright future. He wanted to be a PE teacher. He wanted to go to college. I mean, you wonder where did we all collectively as a community go wrong?
Do you think we're going to see this more and more with, as I talked about, what we're seeing on television, the hatred that we're hearing, and all the just terrible things? Are we going to hear more and more of these type of hate crimes?
I hope not. But I know that one already happened shortly after Mr. Trump made his comments on Mexican immigrants. There was a hate crime. I don't think he died. In fact, I'm pretty sure he did not die. But there was a beating. I think it was. I don't even want to say because I'll probably get it wrong. But certainly in the Northeast, not in New York. Yeah. And I remember thinking, here we go again. But I hope not. I hope that we have learned a lesson, and I hope that as schools, because I do think that schools are paying attention to bullying. As schools pay attention to this, of course, it's not always old, young people, right? It could be older people, and that's even more complicated because how do you stop it? So I don't know. I can tell you though that what I discovered in my research in 2008 is that it was not unique to that it is not unique to our time period. It happened in the U.S. for a long time, and it happens to many different groups. It just happens now that the group targeted is the Hispanic.
Yeah, and also, Mirta, it happens all over the world. If we look at history since our beginning phase of the world, this has happened, discrimination against others, people that have been given low-class status. Look at other countries, look at other situations, but it shouldn't happen in America. But in our history, this has happened, and yet the polarization, how crazy things are becoming. Since the first time I've covered the Miami Book Fair, this is the fifth year, and where we're seeing things politically, the way we're seeing things, it's just terrible. We are human beings. We are all children of God. We have to treat each other with respect and dignity. And if we constantly are going to say hateful or hurtful things based on what we want and how we want things, we lose our freedom, for sure.
I do have to say something that as much as we don't like what's happening with immigrants in the United States, it's still better than in other countries.
Yes.
This level of violence, it's rare in the U.S., which is why we get to write books about it. In other countries, it's a lot more common. So, and as difficult as things are with immigration in this country right now, we're still a lot more tolerant and a lot more welcoming than other countries. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Still, when it happens, it is rare and has to be addressed.
It has to be addressed so it doesn't happen again. So, Mirta, best place to find information on you and learn more about you. Where can we go?
Well, you can just basically Google my name. My book is on Amazon, but it's also in a lot of independent bookstores. Certainly, if you're in Miami, in Books on Books, a lovely independent bookstore here. The book is called Hunting Season, Immigration and Murder in an All-American Town. And to know more about my other book, Finding Mañana, a memoir of the Cuban exodus, likely to be in some bookstores in Miami, but mostly probably at this point online since it's 10 years old. And my last name is Ojito, O-J-I-T-O. So thank you so much for having me on the air.
Oh, well, Mirta, good luck to you and best of luck. And back to Casey.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.